Hello, everyone. Welcome to our final panel of the day, the Feywild, the Wicked, and Whimsy. My name is Brandy Camel, your community lead for Dungeons & Dragons. I'm going to be joined today by a few of our wonderful writers and creators who worked on the Wild Beyond the Witchlight. So let's go ahead and get them introduced. First, of course, we have our illustrious Chris Perkins, game design architect
Hi,
and the project
Brandy.
lead. Hey, how are you?
Haven't seen you in a while.
I know, right? It's we work in a weird, wonderful world these days. So.
Yes.
We are also joined by two of our writers and cartographers for Wild Beyond the Witchlight, Stacy Allen and Will Doyle. How are you two doing today?
Hey, how you doing? We're doing well.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Of course.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
We're sort of scattered all over the place. So Will and Stacy are in the UK, and Brandy and I are in the US, and somehow this technology makes it all work. It's like some sort of arcane magic.
Well, thank you all for joining us today. So let's not waste any time here. As we all know, time works very strange in the Feywild. So, and I know our fans really want to dig into it. Let's start with the basics when it comes to the Feywild. Why are we here? Why did we decide to come to the Feywild? Why now?
Well, I decided to come to the Feywild because I needed some escapism to a place of wonder and whimsy, where full of colorful characters and friendly faces. And no, it's the Feywild has always been part of the D&D multiverse under one name or another, and we have rarely had a chance to go there and spend any time there. And I thought, at this point in 5th edition, it seemed like a good time to actually visit this plane and explore it in detail and give people a real sense of what a Feywild adventure could be and sort of challenge people's expectations about what the Feywild might be.
I know I'm personally really excited about the Feywild, and I know a lot of our fans really love the idea of exploring the Feywild. So I know what excites me about it, but what do you feel is most exciting about the Feywild? And what was maybe the thing you were looking forward to digging into the most?
I'll give my first answer, and then I want to hear what Will and Stacy's answers are. And Milo's got his answer. He's yeah. So for me, when I think of Fey and Fey stories, it's sort of there's a lot of range there tonally. There's there's the creepy Fey and the sort of the Grimm's fairy tales. Hey, there's a moral lesson to be learned here, or there's a cautionary tale here. And then there's the more Disney-esque, kind of picturesque, charming, lighthearted Fey stories. And I just thought I wanted an opportunity to play in both of those pools and create a story that sort of moved between the cheery and the eerie.
I love that phrase, just the cheery and the eerie. That kind of wraps up. That's a great byline for this. Stacy, what's your favorite thing or the most exciting thing about the Feywild?
Yeah, for me, I mean, similarly, I've always been in love with fairy tales, and we've got a 4-year-old daughter, so I'm always watching kind of fantasy things with her and reading fairy tale stories. And I think just the range of characters that you can come across, in the Feywild, and there's no black and white characters. They've all got, strange kind of habits or strange mannerisms or things that they like and things that they don't like, and they're, highly emotional, and they're just really fun characters to sort of think about, and for us to get a chance to develop a range of characters for this book was, yeah, a fantastic opportunity. And one of my favorite, sort of fairy tale enemies are hags, and so it was an absolute dream come true to be able to flesh out some hags, fully in power, in their own sort of realm. That was that was fantastic.
Will, how about you? Is there anything that particularly stands out amongst the rest?
Yeah, I mean, I was super excited by this because I think anything to do with the Feywild obviously taps into fairy stories, and these are kind of like the basic building block stories that we all start off with, so there's such a rich, deep well to delve down into there. When you look at folklore, European folklore, Eastern European folklore, there was loads and loads of stuff that we could kind of study. And I think the Feywild has this wonderful thing of being on one side whimsical and magical and fun and silly, but then it can turn very, very quickly into something more sinister. All fairy stories kind of have a sort of dark edge to them, almost like a sort of the edge of a good dream and a nightmare. And it was really fun kind of treading that line through the story.
That's a really fantastic point that leads into one of my next questions, which is there is sort of this comparison between the Feywild and Domains of Delight that mirrors the Shadowfell and the Domains of Dread that came in Van Richten's guide. So let's dig into that a little bit. How do those really interact with one another? What's really the comparison there?
So the Feywild is kind of like a mirror to our own world or to your D&D home world. And so is the Shadowfell. They both are. The Feywild and the Shadowfell are unique in our cosmology because they are basically reflections of the material plane, of the world that we know. But they're very different reflections. One is sort of clearly sort of sinister, gloomy. The other one a little bit more whimsical and emotional and kaleidoscopic. So it was no coincidence that we kind of released a Shadowfell product, Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, right before we released the Wild Beyond the Witchlight, because these two products together kind of paint a picture of these two realms. But we have long had Domains of Dread as a concept in Ravenloft and in the Shadowfell. We did not have something comparable in the Feywild, and we decided in-house that we wanted to create that there would be a Feywild counterpart to the Domains of Dread, and that's what we're calling Domains of Delight. And in this adventure, The Wild Beyond the Witchlight, this was our chance to show the very first Domain of Delight that anybody's ever really seen. And so part of the challenge and the fun of this product was, okay, we have this concept, now we have to realize it and figure out what is a Domain of Delight and what are the characteristics of a Domain of Delight. Well, one of them is instead of having a Dark Lord controlling it, it's actually got an Archfey. And Archfey create their Domains of Delight through just sort of their raw emotional control over the land around them. And but what is an Archfey? Are they like gods, or are they more like just strange Fey creatures? A lot of discussion went into that. And then, of course, for the adventure, figuring out, okay, what is the name of our domain? What are its characteristics? And then who is the Archfey behind it all? Those were the interesting discussions and thoughts that sort of had to be determined pretty early on in the process. And Will and Stacy, I don't exactly remember at the point you came in whether all of that had been sort of locked down or decided. I think at the very least the domain had a name, and I think the Archfey had pretty much had a name as well. But refresh my memory on that.
Yeah, it was interesting because we did come in, compared to some of the previous projects I've worked on with you guys, we came in earlier than normal here, and there was kind of the backbone of the story was set out. The domain did have a name. The Archfey was defined at that point, but it was very, very loose at that point. So it was a wonderful experience, a really, really good opportunity for Stacey and myself to work together at that kind of early stage. And we would come up with character ideas together. We'd meet up regularly and have chats about it, and then we'd go away and think about the denizens of this world. And then we would come back and talk about it. We had Wizards of the Coast's amazing concept artists coming in and fleshing these characters out. So yeah, it was a great experience and a great point to get involved in it.
So for Prizmir specifically, and I don't know how much we want to get into spoilers and things like that. The book did just release, so maybe we'll stay light on them. But for Prizmir specifically, was there anything about it that really captured you, or that you were like, "Oh, we got to do this"? And what was that, and kind of how did you explore it?
Yeah, so Prismeer, my initial idea for Prismeer was that it is a domain of delight in peril. It is something has happened to it. Things are not right in the domain. The Archfey is sort of in a predicament. The realm has kind of fractured into three pieces, which we're calling hither, thither, and yon. And I sort of gave those names pretty early in my thinking process because what I wanted to do was show you a domain that had different environments in it. So the piece that's called hither is a very different environment from thither, is a very different environment from yon. And in my original conception, Prismeer basically had lowlands, midlands, and highlands. And what that evolved into, particularly when Will and Stacy came aboard and started to visualize this place, that hither would be this kind of bog or swamp, and thither would be a primeval forest, and yon would be a range of rocky peaks lit or basically cloaked in storm clouds with sort of a perpetual thunderstorm brewing in the sky. And we thought that, or at least I thought that, that would be really fun to depict each of those and also give each piece of Prismeer an identity, a visual point of differentiation from the others. And so as you move from one part of the domain to the next, you do almost feel like you're entering into a splinter realm, a new place, and with different sorts of challenges, and you can meet different kinds of fey creatures that live there. Because we were only presenting one domain, I thought it would be nice if this domain could kind of show us more than just one type of Feywild adventure.
So I know Will and Stacy, you developed the maps that that the dungeon master and honestly the players are really going to rely on in exploring the domain of delight of Prismeer. And can you talk a little bit about what that process was like in laying out the map and kind of having it grow from the storylines that were set down by the team?
Uh, yeah, we started off with a very loose sketch of it, which changed around quite a bit. Our kind of process is once we've got a sketch marked out and agreed upon, then I go in and do the kind of line work detail of the map itself, and Stacy does all of the beautiful borders around it in line work, and then all of the magic that comes in with the color is all Stacy there. So yeah, I kind of do the inking, she does the colors to a degree, and it was a really interesting process here. Like when you initially when you think of the Feywild, I think the first thing people think is it's just a big forest. So it was so cool to have these very different environments and to have the kind of swirling cloud going around it and breaking the map up into different parts. And the palace in the middle of it was always something that was kind of on our mind. We had this idea early on that each one of the splinter realms that you go to, you could kind of catch a glimpse of this place through the clouds. And we played around with quite a few different setups, and we ended up with the sort of dial almost that you see the shape of the map now. It's with the palace in the middle, and that was really interesting because although we end it's a domain of delight, and so it has comparisons to the Shadowfell, and of course Barovia and Castle Ravenloft, but we hadn't really thought that as we were doing it, and it was a kind of odd coincidence that both these realms have that similarity, this big castle on the hill. So yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah, and also doing the map so it where the art director, Kate Irwin, she was wonderful to work with. And I'm a big fan of colour, so it was nice to, the Feywild is a vibrant, colourful realm, and because there are 3 splinter realms, each realm could have its own kind of colour scheme, but, everything's quite saturated but not garish. So the maps were incredibly fun to do in that way. And also the borders around the maps, because we were so involved with creating the story, the borders were done last, and I was able to add elements like important, that I thought important elements from each chapter into illustrations into the border, which sort of, the kind of, I was looking at a lot of folk art, and there's quite a lot of symbolism and story ideas just in the borders of a lot of folk art. So it was a great chance to kind of just go for it and put lots of different ideas as well into the borders too. So yeah, it was incredible fun.
Yeah, I think one thing that that Stacey really got well with those borders was there's a kind of sort of old-fashioned look to them, and that's really cool, because I think the adventure itself, like, is tapping into a sense of nostalgia in places, and so those maps had a really kind of cool nostalgic look to them, to me at least.
And we managed to get a few Easter eggs in there in the Prismeer map in the bottom left.
Yes.
There was someone.
Yeah, a few that even surprised me. It's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, we had. I mean, Stacey drew a little dog to begin with, but it didn't quite work out.
There's a folk artist that I like, that she always puts her neighbours' dogs into her pictures, and I was like, I don't really know anyone who's got a dog. Wait a minute, someone who worked on this note has a dog. So yeah, Milo was there.
Yeah.
This is the first time Milo's appeared in a book, Chris?
Yes.
Well, wonderful.
I mean, he has a Feywild twist, to be fair.
Of course. Everything does in this book. Yeah. Will mentioned something that I think is worth noting, and that is the palace at the center being sort of a Fey analog to Castle Ravenloft in the Shadowfell. And that's actually something I envisioned back when I had a brainstorming meeting with our story consultant, Pat Rothfuss, is this idea of having the 2 palaces kind of stand as counterpoints to one another, but be completely different in terms of their flavor. I mean, Castle Ravenloft is this hammer film monstrosity that's sort of built to terrify by its sheer immensity and height. The Palace of Heart's Desire is more like a Disney princess palace, but it has kind of fallen on hard times. The gardener is not working there anymore, and so everything is sort of overgrown and pulling itself apart. And that's one of the things that the characters can kind of help set right, is getting this place back to its, beautiful, splendid past.
Oh, that's wonderful. I can't wait to explore all of that. I'm definitely looking at this as being one of my next campaigns to run, especially for I have a couple of nieces who are on the younger side who are very interested in Dungeons and Dragons, and this is perfect for them. In terms of, let's revisit the title of this panel, the Wicked and the Whimsy. In terms of representing both sides of that, how do you find the balance between Wicked and Whimsy when you're exploring different parts of Prizmir?
Well, Stacey.
Yeah, for me, one of the realms I worked on was Yon, which is the future. The hag there, Endlin Moongrave, represents the future, and she's a very tragic figure. But because I was getting to sort of concept a hag, I wanted her to be absolutely terrifying. So, and she has the potential to be incredibly creepy. But I have surrounded her with kind of clownish goblins, and she's got stage hands, and everyone's kind of in fear of her. So it's a little bit, I suppose, like Goblin King from Labyrinth. You've got this kind of imposing figure, but to make her less frightening, she is surrounded by, as sort of cohorts that are just kind of, sort of in deference to her the entire time, and they're sort of bungling and falling over each other and stuff. So that was kind of how I tried to balance it in Yon, in Motherhorn anyway, the hag's lair.
And how evil can a hag be if she plays with puppets? I mean, really.
Yes, Chris, puppets aren't creepy at all.
I have actually had nightmares about her, so she's quite creepy.
Yes, she lives.
Will,
how do you balance the wicked and the whimsy, Will? It
was really, I think the state of the different realms, the fact that since the Hourglass Coven have taken over, the realms are kind of slipping into this kind of corrupted state, was something that allowed us at any time to kind of give a hint of that darkness. So one of the realms I worked on was Thither, the realm of the past, and it's a big sprawling Fey woodland, but sort of emanating from the hag's lair is this corruption which has kind of spread across everything. So it's I was lucky enough to have the singing mushrooms in my in my realm, so I had the campestry, and they're obviously lovely, but they can get corrupted into sort of cruel toadstools that try and spoil stories and stuff. So it was kind of like everywhere you went in these realms, you always kind of had the feeling that something's a little bit broken. It's slipping away from you. So again, it's that feeling of a little bit like a dream. Like a dream can be very happy, but then suddenly turn very nasty. I think
I really like what you did, Will, with I love what you did, Will, with the lair for Scabatha Nightshade, the hag who lives in the forest of Thither, because the Thither itself is a beautiful primeval forest, generally speaking, but when you get to her lair specifically, Loonlurch, it's this fallen over giant decayed tree that she sort of hollowed out and built her house inside. And it's really quite a terrifying place if you just sort of visualize that. And I like that, this sort of decayed, rotted out structure has been, I love the way you visualized it in your map and how it comes to life in the text, and sort of reinforcing the theme of the past. Things eventually die and decay, but here's a hag who basically embraces that and kind of lives in it. She lives in the death and decay, and that's distressing. But at the same point, right outside her lair, you put this goblin candy market. So you've got the wicked and the whimsy literally just existing side by side.
I also think I was going to say I also think the wicked and the whimsy comes across in, like, when you visit the different domains. You have those that are working with the hags or for the hags or for the evil that's seeped into the land. But then there's a chance to come across the denizens of Prismeer that were there before, that remember what it was like, and there's some fantastic characters that you can come across and help them bring Prismeer back to the way it was. So there's a good balance of characters in there as well.
Yeah. You remember when the design direction I sent for that, which was make sure in each of your domains you're meeting one person who was a resident before everything went to hell. You're meeting one person who, like the characters, is sort of an intruder in the realm. And then you're meeting at least one other character who's brokered some sort of deal with the hags that hasn't gone as well as they would have liked.
Yeah, I love that about the adventure, that there's so many sort of sad stories in there, but all of them they all have a bit of hope in there. You meet these characters that have these terrible situations, and it's got that kind of fairy tale sadness, but each of those is sort of a hook. That's a chance for you to fix this problem. So I know that as when I was kind of play testing my chapters, you develop all these little hooks as you go through it of, oh, we've got to help this guy, and we've got to do this, and we've got to do that, to make everything better, make everything happy again. So it's kind of quite classic feel to it there.
Let's talk about the kind of practicality of running the adventure in that regards. I know that when I run an adventure, my players have a tendency to want to help the least likely NPC that I had planned in the back of my head for them to engage with and get a quest from. Are there any that kind of stand out in having put, Wild Beyond the Witchlight together, that stand out as that, like, oh man, I really hope parties love this character?
For me, one of the ones was a character that I think Stacey brought to life in the Witchlight Carnival, which is Burley the Bug Bear. We had concept art for Burley early on, and Burley is a bugbear, but unlike sort of the archetypal bugbear brute, he's like a poet at heart, and he's a very gentle soul, but he's got a tough job because he's basically doing security at the carnival. But he's likable and he's lovable, and his sad story is he has a brother named Hurley who disappeared, and so there's this cloud of sadness that sort of follows him around because he doesn't know what happened to his brother, and he can't just wander off and go find his brother because he's got job to do at the carnival, and Mr. Witch and Mr. Light need him to be there. And so he's sort of torn, and characters who meet this bugbear, if they're sort of struck by his gentleness and his sort of uncharacteristic helpfulness, they might want to go and help him out and find out what happened to his brother, or at least get some information for him so that he's not just hanging without any knowledge of, is Hurley alive? Is he dead? What's happened? And so that's one of the stories, one of the many stories that characters will stumble upon. And there are so many characters with so many stories in an adventure of this size that we don't expect parties to latch on to everything. But I think most of the characters that you meet are relatable enough that some of the players will want to help them. I think that's great.
Stacey, is there anybody that stands out in your mind?
Oh gosh. Yes, I mean, aside from, in Yon, the realm of the future, the mountainous realm, the Hag's Lair is kind of a mountaintop theatre, and she has a variety of performers and staff. And I think if I was playing it, I'd want to help every single person in her employ to escape. I'd figure out a way. I mean, they're crying, they're really, they just want to get away from her. But aside from that, I don't know how much I can say about it. There's someone that you might come across in Yon. His name is Mudlump. Am I okay to talk a little bit about?
Yes.
You may not, the players may not even come across him, but if you do, he's actually, you initially an enemy, and very well might still be an enemy, but he's a beekeeping cyclops. And if you engage with him, if you start talking to him, you realize that there are other ways that you can deal with him. You find out that maybe he just wants to find love after all, and then you have the task of trying to find someone to match with Mudlump, the beekeeping cyclops. So I think that would be a fun challenge.
One of the things I really like about Mudlump is that he doesn't even understand the concept of love to begin with. But once you explain it to him, he becomes so enamored with the concept that he really wants to try to hook up with somebody. And one of the great things about having Will and Stacey working together on this project is they can sort of go off and conspire on their own. And so in a section that Will wrote in the palace, you actually meet a likely candidate for Mudlump's affections.
Match made in heaven.
Yes. Assuming you make the connection, you think, oh, these two are right for each other. Then you can try to hook them up.
Will, how about you?
there's so many, but one of my favourites is a character, a goblin called Chucklehead, and he has a candy apple for a head, and it's kind of rotting, and there's a worm in there, sort of eating away at the inside of his head. But in his own mind, he's befriended this little worm and talks to it. But he works for one of the hags, for Granny Nightshade, and is kind of important in the hierarchy of her people, and so yeah, he's kind of a nasty character, but again, he can be sympathetic, and he's actually some of the children that Granny Nightshade has working in her toy workshop. He has a lot of sympathy for, and he's come to like them, so he's quite protective of them. So I think there's interesting possibilities there with him. Yeah, like I said, there's so many to pick from.
I know it's never fair for me to be like, yes, now pick from one of your many created children within this book. But one of the kind of key features of Wild Beyond the Witchlight is that we've really taken a focus of taking a step away from combat always being the answer in an encounter. And that's one of the things that I think is absolutely wonderful about this book, is that some of my favorite moments at the table are when my players find a creative way to avoid combat, or find a creative way to make a resolution without having to resort to rolling to initiative. I would love to hear a few of your favorite examples of how this was kind of implemented into Wild Beyond the Witchlight, if there's any particular encounters that almost sing better if they're not prefaced by combat.
Yeah, I've always said that in the Feywild, you can get farther with a smile and a kind word than you can with a sword and a fireball. It's if you understand sort of the rules of how the Feywild works and why the people who live there behave the way they do, it can be easier to get around. And in this story particularly, one of the ones that stands out in my mind is, without giving too much away, there's a point where in Hither you come upon this slanted tower, and there is a creature who is imprisoned atop the tower. A benign fellow who can actually be very useful in the future. But he's sort of trapped up there by a couple snakes, giant snakes that have basically coiled around the base of the tower. And normally you'd think, well, they're just snakes. But if you're sort of paying attention to and sort of you've learned some lessons along the way, you kind of know that these snakes you might actually be able to talk to and negotiate with. And it turns out, yeah, you can, because they've been awakened. And through just a conversation with these snakes, you realize that they're not actually keen on doing what they're doing, and they just go off and sleep somewhere if they could. And so you can kind of negotiate your way past them to get what you want without having to attack and kill them. I love that. And then another example is much later in the adventure, when you're sort of moving around the Palace of Heart's Desire. You encounter a fearsome beast, and but the adventure gives you all sorts of ways to deal with that beast apart from just having to attack it. Even though it's a terrible monster and very frightening and might eat you, there are things that clever characters can do to lure it away, or to preoccupy it, or chase it off. There's an even bigger monster you can find that will chase off this fierce monster and sort of open the way for you. And I think if you're running this adventure for younger players in particular, giving them a chance to explore the carnival, learn some of the lessons of the Feywild, and then go into the Feywild, it'll be fun to see them pick up on this idea of, oh, we might be able to talk or trick or cleverly maneuver our way through this adventure without having to rely on killing everything. And I think that's just a good lesson. And actually, for me as just an adventure designer, I think for future adventures, this is an idea that that I could see going back to again and again, always making sure that there are multiple ways to get through a problem. I think that's just good design in general. This adventure just sort of gave us an excuse to really kind of lean into it heavily.
Yeah, I definitely know adult players who can learn that lesson or might
Yeah.
need to learn that lesson.
But that said, sometimes you just want to hit something over the head with a big heavy object, right? And
Right.
if you want to sort of hack and slash your way through that, like many D&D adventures, there's certainly plenty of things to fight and plenty of things that you can kill. But I love that we've created so many opportunities for you. And Will and Stacy, I don't know if you know this, but very late in the game, I even added a few more. I'm not sure you're even aware of them. Little instances of not having to rely on brutality. But can you think of any favorites yourself, encounters where you sort of built them so that combat is not a necessity?
I think for me, the sort of working on the Witchlight Carnival, I really took that as an opportunity as, if you fight your way through it, which you can, to get the information that you want to get, you can get the information. It will be tricky, but you can. But you will learn so much more about possibly the domain that you're going to, and you will gain friends or allies, which could prove useful later in the game. So I really wanted the carnival to be something like where you learn that going around and talking and trade and bartering and learning the ways of the Feywild rather than fighting your way through it will get a bit of a greater reward for you going into Prismeer, especially with the carnival owners, Mr. Witch and Mr. Light. I don't want to say too much about them, but there's many sides to them. They're quite complicated characters, so it would be great if characters got to know them a little bit better too.
Will, are there any encounters for you that come to mind?
Yeah, I think it's not any one specific encounter, but I think what we did with the coven is really, really interesting. That you have these three wicked sisters who, structurally in the adventure, you kind of go into the domain and you try and locate, whichever hag is running that domain, and it could end up as a big brawl. You could just fight them. But they're really quite powerful, and if they were to muster all of their forces against you, it can be quite a dangerous situation to be in. But we put in the fact that they all, each of them they all hate each other, but each of them particularly hates one of the other ones. And as hags, hags aren't really combat creatures. They're much more story creatures, and so they're always interested in bargains. So you can get into this kind of interesting back and forth between the hags and between the realms, of kind of making bargains with them, doing favors with them. So that was really, really interesting. And also within pretty much every realm, there are a number of characters you can come across who have been spurned by the hag or tricked by them, and have their own desire to get back at them. So you can kind of pick up allies and hints that when you face those hags, you can call in help, or trick them in your own ways. I think that's a really clever side of the adventure that I think we got to.
Yeah, building on that too, I think you're absolutely right that the hags are beautiful examples of how you can sort of talk your way around problems and actually kind of turn them either against each other or get something that you need in the short term to sort of accomplish some other goal. I think there's a lot of evil creatures in this story, and it's a common thread that evil doesn't really get along with itself too well. And so if you just poke at them a little bit, you can sort of turn them against each other. One of the key supporting characters in the story is this figure from D&D's past named Warduke. And I was, ever since I first contemplated doing this story, I've wanted to figure out a way to shoehorn that character into this story. And I love, for instance, that even though he's terrifying and he will cut you to ribbons, if you get on his bad side, you can actually get him on your side. And how fun would it be to be stomping around the Feywild with, Mr. Flaming Sword and Armor with you? Even though he's a bad dude, once you sort of figure out what makes him tick, you can kind of get him to help you out. And I think that's really cool. Your enemy can become your friend.
Oh, I think that's just a wonderful like bullet point of the Feywild, right? I mean, I think it's the dichotomy of your enemy becoming your friend or your friend becoming your enemy is probably very true across the board.
It could.
I do want to dig into, you mentioned Warduke, but we've been teasing a lot of the nostalgic characters on our social media and through some of our partners. Let's talk about some of those throwback characters. You've touched on Warduke. Is there anybody else that you've brought back, or that's kind of a fun jab at D&D's past that people can look forward to?
Yeah, there's one I can't mention because it's sort of a big secret.
Yeah.
But I can mention some of the others. So one of the big themes about this adventure is time. Time is, we beat this theme over the head relentlessly in this adventure, and nostalgia, of course, is part of that. And so this story, even more so than some of the adventures we've released in years past, kind of dives into the history of D&D and brings some stuff forward. And Will and Stacey are guilty of some of this as well, slipping things into their maps that are sort of hints at stuff from D&D's past. But in addition to Warduke, who first showed up in an old expert series adventure called Quest for the Heartstone, but was also rendered as an action figure back in the 1980s. We brought back a number of some of his buddies as well, who were also action figures, or who, like him, appeared in the original D&D cartoon series from the 1980s, like Kellic the Sorcerer. And Kellic is one of my favorites because he's just kind of a nasty guy. Your archetypal, vain, evil wizard. But in the original cartoon series, Kellic had a particular thing for acquiring unicorn horns. I won't go into the details of the plot of the cartoon. You can watch it on YouTube or whatever. But that's something we preserved in this story. He's still got a preoccupation with acquiring unicorn horns. So little nods like that to the past. Other characters that we brought back are some good aligned figures who include Strongheart the Paladin, who's sort of this cheesy do-gooder, Warduke's good aligned counterpart. And he's sort of got a band around him who have kind of been pulled into the story, much in a sort of a different way than the characters are pulled into the story. But he and his friends, like Elkhorn the dwarf and Mercian the cleric, they're there to serve as foils for some of the villains, but also as potential helpers for the characters. They've got their own mission, though. So other bits of nostalgia that we brought in, I'll let Stacy or Will talk about the Mystery Mine.
Oh yeah, so the Mystery Mine, that is an attraction at the Witchlight Carnival, and it looks exactly like the D&D cartoon series where all the kids go into it and disappear into the realm of Dungeons and Dragons.
Yes.
So that is there. I won't say what's
canonically in my mind, that's where it always was. It was always in the Witchlight Carnival.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Oh, it makes a lot of sense. That's for sure.
Yeah, it does.
Other bits of
nostalgia.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Will.
So no, that was just funny when we were coming up with the idea for the carnival. It just, it was one of the first things we thought of. I think because our daughter had been watching the D&D cartoon on DVD recently, and we thought, well, we wonder if we put in something similar to it, and then we thought, should we make it look exactly like it? Why not?
There was a point where I said to Will, how much should this look like the one who's like, exactly like
yeah. And then other bits of nostalgia that we brought back, there were some sort of classic monsters that were updated to 5th edition. Will already mentioned the campestries, which are these little singing mushrooms who sing in nasal falsettos. But bringing back the Jabberwock, sort of an old D&D monster that originally appeared in a Gary Gygax adventure early on. So we really are going back to the early days of D&D with stuff like that. And then with, I just lost my train of thought. Gosh.
The Feywild will do that to you, Chris.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, time dilations and all the rest of it. So yeah, the nostalgia hammer really got a lot of use this time out, basically. But hopefully, the way that we present these characters like Warduk and Strongheart and Kellic, they're sort of tangled up in the story, much like the characters get tangled up on their own. And but there's a lot of flexibility for the DM to sort of play with what's there. And I think one of the keys of this adventure is we're sort of telling you about places and about characters in this wondrous location. But it's really, we don't know. We have no way of knowing what your players are going to glom onto. And so we heartily encourage dungeon masters to take what's on the page, but then run with it, take it in new directions. If Kellic could become much more prominent in the story than he is by virtue of how the characters end up interacting with him. And that's great. I think that allowing your players to run away with the adventure is absolutely 100% approved by this dungeon master.
Yeah, I think really interesting for us there when we were designing it with the idea of every encounter can be bypassed peacefully. Was we didn't really design them like, okay, this is how you do it. This is the one thing that you need to do to get safely through this. This is the one thing this person needs to hear, or this is the one check you need to make. We kind of presented characters in these situations kind of tied up in this story with their own motivations, and it most often doesn't really define how you get past it. It just gives you that as a tool for the DM to run with, and the kind of you can read into it fairly clearly what will work, but it leaves a lot open for you as a DM and for the players to mess around with. Yeah,
and we've also got things like we sort of defined the rules of the Feywild, and there are kind of 3 biggies that we kind of hammer on repeatedly in the adventure, and that is the rule of ownership, the rule of hospitality, and the rule of reciprocity. And those exist to give players options and workarounds to all the role-playing scenarios that the adventure presents. Like if you know the rule of reciprocity, that's a powerful tool, because what it basically says is a Fey expects to receive a gift for a gift that it gives. And likewise, if you give a Fey a gift, it must give you a gift in return. And that gift has to be perceived as being of equal or greater value. So that rule exists and it's always there. And clever players can use that or weaponize that in dealing with the Fey creatures of Prismeer and the Feywild in general.
Yeah, there's so many interesting like trinkets and little items that you might pick up that might not be worth anything in gold, but gold means nothing to most in the Feywild. So if your characters, if your players say, hey, do you think this guy might like a bottle of Witchlight wine, and then it's up to the DM to say, actually, yeah, they might like that. So so there's lots of things that you can bargain with.
Yes, and there's a lot of stuff actually baked into the adventure. Like, for instance, there are these mushrooms you can find called prickle noggins, and they're like these spiky, spiny-capped mushrooms, but they're very popular fashion items in fairy culture at the moment. They're haute couture, and if you basically collect these things, you can basically get anything you want from a sprite just by handing him one of these things. Like, here's a hat! Yay, a hat! Here. Super fun, super goofy, but certainly in keeping with the Feywild.
Awesome. Well, there's one more topic I want to touch on before we wrap up here, and I'd like to end where the adventure begins, which is the Witchlight Carnival. The carnival itself is very kind of modular in nature, and there's parts of it that you can use or maybe avoid because you don't know that your players will be receptive to it. Talk about a little bit about like the composition of the carnival and how valuable a tool it is for introducing the party to this adventure.
So yeah, so we when we initially concepted the Witchlight Carnival and the map to go with it, we had the idea of the map being like if you go to a theme park and they hand you a map of the theme park at the sort of entrance booth. So we intend it to be used as you roll it out in front of the players when you go into the carnival and sort of say, right, where do you want to go? And because it's intended to be out in front of the players, we thought we could add some mechanics into the border. So you track time in one corner, which various events happen at different times, and you track the mood of the carnival in the other corner. And the mood of the carnival is an important factor on how the carnival sort of runs. If you're sort of, if you keep barging into people or you keep like knocking and bumping into fairies or pushing them over or something, if you're not like enjoying yourself, you can bring the mood of the carnival down, and everyone that works there, becomes a little bit more, a little bit down, and it starts to get very cloudy. Just like all the realms, the carnival itself is almost like a character. It will sort of react to how the players are reacting, and that is tracked as well using a counter in the bottom right of the map, and so that determines how you interact with some of the sort of main characters of the carnival. And the carnival map itself, it's kind of when Will designed it, it's kind of he did it in a shape like an hourglass, which was a nice shape for the carnival. It just has this nice sort of main thoroughfare, and we had a lot of fun coming up with different attractions in the carnival. We spent many nights, many dinner times talking about what we could put in there. I was just thinking, if I took my daughter to a Feywild carnival, what would she like to see? And so that all the sort of ideas kind of came from there. And yeah, the players are free to roam and free to visit the attractions, as they like, and they sort of uncover what's going on in the carnival as they go.
One of my favorite elements there is the pie eating contest where you take custard damage. But I also like the giant snail race because it's so absurd. I mean, how exciting can a giant snail race be? And then you discover that those things can really move. They've been holding back. So there's lots of super fun, charming stuff there. For me, though, I think one of the great appeals of the carnival is it's so portable. You can literally have it land on any world, outside any town, any city, bringing its sort of autumnal magic with it. And there are little characters along that sort of help explain how it sort of settles in, like the treant who moves trees and bushes around. So there's clear places for the carnival to set up and things like that. And then just the fact that the carnival is not a hostile place. It's a very different environment than a lot of players will be accustomed to because of that. And speaking honestly, when we sent the adventure out for playtesting, a lot of the groups came back and said, we love the carnival so much, we didn't want to go into the Feywild. We just wanted to hang out here and have fun where nothing was going to kill us and we could just win prizes.
Sometimes that's a nice way to relax from adventuring.
It is. But I think this is the first adventure we've done for 5th edition where we don't presume a starting world. We basically say, hey, DM, use the world you got. This works perfectly. This will get you into the adventure no matter where it is.
Awesome. Well, I know I can't wait to dig into it. I am completely enamored with everything Feywild and Prismeer and the Witchlight Carnival, and this is going to be an awesome experience for everybody. I want to thank you all for joining us today, Chris, Stacy, Will. We really appreciate your time here today. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been wonderful.
It's been a real pleasure. Thanks.
Before we head out, a quick reminder that everything we're doing this weekend is not just a celebration of our latest adventure, but it's also a fundraiser for our friends over at Extra Life. If you'd like to learn more about how to support Children's Miracle Network hospitals and make a donation or pick up some super adorable Displacer Kitten merch in the process, visit our website at dndcelebration.com and click on Extra Life. Up next, we have our final exciting adventure of the day, DM'd by Dave Harmon, called Players of the Yawn. That's going to be super interesting, so stay tuned for that. It's going to be a journey.